Clash of Kings 2018 edition. It's out and it's on the table.
So here we go. I have got my hands wrapped firmly around the Clash of Kings 2018 edition, an organised play supplement for Kings of War from Mantic. And while you admire some of this lovely artwork, I'll tell you that I'm not going to go through every single page in this book and pore over all the details, because I'm sure Mantic wouldn't really appreciate me effectively showing you every single word printed in this thing. So instead I'm going to go through a few choice sections, particularly those that are of interest to me and my armies, and give my overall impressions on the changes that have been made to the Kings of War rule set and whether I think they are sweeping enough or perhaps too sweeping. So in the first part of the book we have some fluff, which I'm not really going to focus on. People who are really interested in that, I'm sure you'll enjoy reading it, and I believe it does continue where the summer campaign left off, letting you know exactly how that bad boy ended. Next, as in the previous Clash of Kings book, there is a guide to setting up your own tournament. So this is very handy for all you budding tournament organisers out there who perhaps don't have any experience in the field. This book's got everything you need apart from, important things like players, a tournament hall. I've had a look through this, and it's all pretty standard. If you're familiar with the Kings of War tournament scene, there should be nothing alien to you in here. Information on how to put together a tournament pack. I've been to a few tournaments that could have used some advice from here. Now, the juicy part. Changes to rules and new units. Yes, that's right, new units. The last Clash of Kings book was, I'm not going to say roundly criticised, but there were the murmurs of criticism for the fact that it didn't introduce new units. And it's kind of a no-win situation for Mantic, because when they do release new units, then people will point out that there are still gaps in the range in the army lists that they don't have models for. And when they don't add new units, then it's suggested that perhaps the game is becoming a little stale and they need to reinvigorate it with an injection of new life, or death, as the case may be. On this page here you can see there are some rule and unit changes. A notable one I'm going to look at here is the change to Thunderous Charge. So, when disordered, they still lose all the Thunderous Charge, but when hindered, they only lose it by 1. Which is quite a big deal, because Thunderous Charge has been shunned, many feel, in favour of Crushing Strength, so this gives it that little boost. For those units that have more than 1 Thunderous Charge, it's now more viable than ever for them to make hindered charges. Another one I want to look at down here, Headstrong. It's been changed to a 3+ from a 4+, so that's even more likely to benefit them, and it gives it a little bit of a boost to Dwarven Ale as well. Like I said, I'm not going to go through every single change, but there are some I'm going to look at as we go through some pages here. I'm going to stop when it gets to an army relevant to me. So the first army that has some relevance to me is, of course, Ogres. And if I were to request one change to the Ogre army, it would have been Chariots need to be better, and that's exactly what's happened. It's not just Ogres though, Chariots across the board seem to have been boosted. They've got a speed increase. Not all of them seem to have a speed increase, some of them are already fast enough, but the Ogre one definitely needed it. It's gone up to 8, and the nerve has also crept up by what appears to be 1. Chariots are one of the unit types that people felt were horribly underpowered prior to this book. Two seldom seen unit types were Chariots and Cavalry Hordes. And I can tell you that something has been done to address that as well, which we will get to shortly. Now we're at the Goblin section, Goblins being my favourite army of course, and Moorbeast Pack. It's been hit with a little bit of a nerf bat, as has the War Trombone. War Trombone is down to 10 attacks rather than 12, and the Moorbeast Pack now hits on 4 instead of 3. Those were two units that were considered to be slightly overpowered for their point value, so I can see why both of those have been amended. Fleabag Chariots have got the all-round chariot boost though, with their nerve increasing. And the King on Chariot is now nimble, which is very nice. His defence does come down. But overall, I think the general Kings of War player base will agree that Moorbeast Packs and War Trombones were two troublesome units, and they've maybe been balanced a little bit now. There's no sign of anything happening to Trolls in here. They're another unit that are considered to be quite strong, but I don't think there's been quite the vocal opposition to their power when compared to particularly the War Trombone, which is known as one of the main cheese dispensers in the Kings of War scene. Undead? Well, Not really any changes at all. These changes were already in effect. I do like these large battle scene shots that they've got in this book. It's very old school. In fact, I'm looking at my wall where I've got some old Warhammer Fantasy posters, and it's very reminiscent of those days. Overall, the quality of the photos seems to be a significant improvement on previous Mantic publications. Now we're on to formations, which people familiar with other game systems will be aware of exactly what a formation is. It's when you take a particular combination of units, you gain a benefit for that. It can be used either as a way of gently wrangling players towards armies that more closely match the fluff, or it can be used to perhaps bring certain underpowered units up to par when taken in certain combinations. And we've got a couple of goblin formations here, which I'm going to look at. Now, I don't know if I can actually field any of these at this stage. I'll need to buy some more models. So first of all, we've got the sneaky stabbers, which cost 25 points, and for that, you're going to be giving a lot of units the vicious special rule. So you need 2 rabble regiments, a rabble horde, and a bigot. Now, some would argue that goblin sharpsticks could have actually done with more of a little boost than rabble. Rabble seem to be more popular in the goblin community, but it looks nice to me. Giving several weak units vicious for 25 points sounds like a bit of a bargain, although of course it may compromise what other plans you had in mind for your list because it's requiring you to take these 4 specific units. And it has to be a bigot on foot as well, and as you know, mounted goblin characters are amazing. Underneath, now this one's very interesting, the Voracious Maw Pack. So this one costs 35 points, and for this you're required to take a Fleabag Rider Horde and 2 Fleabag Rider Regiments. So that is a lot of Fleabags, but it is going to give a little bonus to a Cavalry Horde, which is something that not a lot of people take currently. And this gives an additional nerve, and it gives them the Strider special rule, which is very, very handy, because then their charges will never be hindered, which is quite a big deal for cavalry, especially cavalry with only 1 thunderous charge, because they're the ones who have actually arguably been hit by the change to thunderous charge, because they're the only ones who will not be carrying any thunderous charge into a hindered charge. I feel like my words overcomplicated that, but I think you get the idea. So giving those units Strider, quite a big deal. There are still some issues with cavalry hordes, they take up a large amount of space, but one of the issues with taking up space is that you often make hindered charges, and this really mitigates that. So I can definitely see that being taken. And now let's look at some for the undead. So we've got Morgoth's Rotting Retinue, which is a nice name. 40 points, and this requires a lot of ghouls, a horde and 4 troops, and each unit is granted Thunderous Charge. Now that's actually quite a big deal, because as far as infantry goes, ghouls are very fast, speed 6. It's quite feasible that they're going to be making charges. Giving them Thunderous Charge makes them a little bit more potent. Because previously I've mainly used ghouls as kind of a mobile scouting unit, potentially sitting on objectives because they're so cheap, rushing out ahead of the main battle line to block up the enemy. But they could actually pack a slight punch now. 40 points for that, and you're boosting 5 units with that 40 points. So that might be worth a look. I've got a lot of zombies which could easily double as ghouls. And here we have Elona's Thirstful Coven. This one costs 30 points, and this requires a fair bit of Soul Reaver infantry, which is another thing I don't have. So 1 Soul Reaver infantry regiment and 2 troops, and each unit in this formation is fearless. You don't see a lot of Soul Reaver infantry, at least I haven't seen a lot of them in people's lists. So these formations, it looks like they're being used to give a bit of a boost to units that aren't widely taken, which is what they should be used for, so I'm in favour. And all the armies have at least 1 or 2 formations along these lines, so everyone can get a boost from this book. And if you're someone like me, who primarily collects the models and then figures out how to put them into an army and maybe adds things to make them more competitive later, then you've probably got a lot of models that you don't use very much. But with these formations and some of the other changes in this book, you may actually find more use for them. Now we're on to new units. I believe every army has at least 1 new unit. The goblins have 2, which are quite interesting. First of all, they have the Goblin Mega Blaster. Now the ogres have had access to a red goblin blaster for a long time, and I always wondered why the goblins weren't able to take one. But now they can. And it's really a kamikaze machine. Yellow-bellied could be an issue because if it fails a yellow-bellied test when declaring a charge, then it'll explode, but where it started. So if it's in your battle line, so it's an area of effect, so wherever it goes kaboom, it's going to do a lot of damage to nearby units, piercing 4 2d6 hits. So this could chew through an entire tightly packed battle line, your own or your enemy's. So that's a fun thing in there. That's the kind of thing you want in a goblin army, something that's a bit unpredictable and crazy. Now this one's interesting to me, Grogger's Great Lobber. So this is a war engine. It's very, very similar to a rock lobber. The differences I can see are that it's more expensive, and that it has the elite special rule, and blast d6 plus 3 instead of d6 plus 2. So a little bit more expensive, but it is better. Now this is very interesting to me because I do like to take a lot of rock lobbers just because they are so crazy and wild and unpredictable and potentially devastating. And with this, that means that in a regular 2,000 point game, unless I'm wrong, I could actually take 4 of them now. 3 regular rock lobbers and Grogger's Great Lobber, which would be absolutely amazing as far as I'm concerned. And even when you have those games where you just can't roll a 5+ to save your life, it still adds a lot of drama to the game. That one dice roll that probably isn't going to hit, but if it does, it is devastating. Now, in the undead section, we have Apathis, Champion of Death, who is a monster-sized hero on a 75mm square base. Now, he also makes use of the new Dread rule, which reduces the nerve of nearby enemy units. He's also very inspiring, and he can be mounted on a winged worm, gaining the Heavy Flyer rule, which is one of the new rules that's come in. The other new undead unit is something that disappoints me slightly, because when I saw that Death Pack was going to be a unit, I thought, hey, am I finally going to have something to use my old dire wolves for? Something that it can be argued undead are perhaps lacking is a unit like that. Not that they necessarily should have one, but then I see, no, it's infantry. It's described as a writhing mass of teeth, claws and bone. The Death Pack is a collection of horrific undead beasts herded into battle by a handler. They sweep over the enemy in a flurry of vicious attacks, and only the hardiest warrior can withstand their frenzied onslaught. Speed 6, shambling, nimble, vicious. And you can have a bat swarm with them for extra 10 points, in which case they gain stealthy. I'm having trouble visualising how this unit's going to look. But if they're adding it into the game, then presumably that means they've got a model coming. Now they've also added in some mercenary characters, including Ronaldo the Bard, who, despite only having 1 attack, has Crushing Strength 4, which is his most notable rule, I would say, Rallying, Yellow-Bellied, Blast D3, so a little bit of a comedy character there. Now we move on to the 2018 artifacts and spells. There are some changes in points to certain artifacts, there are some entirely new ones. I'll stop at a few that I feel are particularly notable, starting with the Healing Brew, which has dropped down from remove D3 points of damage to remove D2 points of damage, so obviously they felt that was overpowered, and I would imagine this is going to be used to address some of the items that were must-have, because there were certain artifacts that you would see in the majority of lists, and that is wrong when that happens. That means that there are some that are just objectively better than others if everybody's taking them. Ensorcelled Armour is back, but it can't take anyone's defence up to 6, which is what it was primarily used for. Banner of the Griffin, that is one you see a lot, and I believe it has gone up 5 points. So we'll see if that addresses the fact that that was taken far too often for my liking. And there's another item that's in exactly the same boat. The Loot of Insatiable Darkness has gone up by 5 points as well. So obviously, the good people at Mantic and the Rules Committee felt that those 2 particular items were slightly undercosted, which was contributing to them being taken far too often. There are some new spells, so we're going to look at Mind Fog here. Now this is a very interesting one. This is 10 points, which you can buy for a wizard. Any unit that has the ability to take a spell, basically, can buy other spells. What makes this one interesting is that it forces you to take a nerve test without applying any damage. So it doesn't do damage, so it's cheap, 30-inch range, but you are going to take a nerve test if it causes any hits. So it's a very cheap way of forcing a nerve test on a unit that perhaps is lucky to be alive. Only Mind Fog 1 though, so you're going to be looking at rolling a 4+ to hit with that. So 50-50 chance of making a unit take a nerve test for only 10 points. That sounds pretty good, although I suppose it depends which other spells you have access to. Just to give you an example of another spell here, Now this is obviously in there to counter armies that take nothing but defense 5 and 6 units, 12-inch range, 20 points, but instead of rolling damage as normal, roll under the target's defense. So the higher their defense, the easier it is to get damage through on them. So if you're just bringing nothing but low nerve, high defense units, this spell is going to be the bane of your existence. It'll force people, hopefully, to take more balanced forces. Here is the new scenario table. You'll notice there's no kill in there, which I'm in favour of, because killing is always really a sub-objective of the game regardless, so I don't think it needs to be the entire game. I like it when there is actually something else to play for on the table other than just murder. Taken Hold is an interesting one, because you actually acquire victory points throughout the game, not just at the end. And often when you have to sit on objectives during a game, it's at the end of the game that it counts, in Kings of War anyway. But this is the exception to that, which I like. There are other scenarios in here in which you gain victory points as the game rolls on, but not quite like this, so I think that is a nice one. I believe it's entirely new, but if it's been in anything before, then please let me know. So there's a little taster of the kind of thing you'll expect when sampling your very own copy of Clash of Kings 2018 edition. And I have to say, I strongly approve. I don't think game systems, particularly those that are played in tournament settings, can withstand several years of a rule set without tweaks being made, and I would argue that the previous Clash of Kings book didn't make enough changes. There were some tweaks, but I don't think they were quite sweeping enough. I think this book has got it just about right. There are things I would like to see changed or rebalanced that would probably require an entire new edition to do so. I can see the way they're thinking with this one. They haven't completely changed the way the game is played, but they've addressed a couple of glaring issues. Certain unit types that weren't being taken, certain items that were being taken frequently, and certain units that were just slightly too good. So I'm very much looking forward to any new models that are coming out to accompany the new unit choices in this book, because when you go to a lot of tournaments, you do tend to see the same units over and over again. So adding some spice to that mix should make things interesting for quite a while longer. Anyway, I think that's a long enough look at Clash of Kings 2018 edition. And now that I have this, I'm off to go and make an army list for a tournament coming up this weekend, actually.